Hello and welcome. Very shortly we shall begin. It is, of course, Worldbuilding Wednesday. Sort of, well, you know. So, we will be working on that. I'll get right back to that. Okay, here we are. So, of course, I wanted to start slightly earlier today, but unfortunately, I mean, we are technically still earlier than usual, but I got sidetracked working on, well, things that are generally irrelevant to most things. I mean, Galactic Requiem, of course. I mean, you know, what else am I going to be working on? But specifically, tech level 9 and 8 vehicles, specifically aircraft. For those of you who don't know our galactic standard tech leveling system, not leveling of technology, but you know, like tech levels and what they compare to. Tech level 8 is what you Elysians out there would consider World War I and World War II, while tech level 9 is what you Elysians would consider the Cold War era. So I was working on a few fighters of those eras, both, you know, propeller and jet. Well, of course, jet from tech level 9, propellers from tech level 8, and all that. So, got some of that done. Very little amount. I had to do a bunch of research. I mean, one can simply put stats down, of course, but if you want accuracy, I mean, gotta do a bit of work on it. Unfortunately, I mean, you know, not really unfortunately, but sort of unfortunately, it has absolutely nothing to do with what we usually do. I mean, do you see a lot of World War II era fighters on the cyberpunk world that we're on? Not often, but you know. So, I mean, it comes up on occasion in Galactic Requiem, of course. There are medieval worlds and past worlds and all that. Apocalyptic worlds and modern worlds. That, well, what you would consider modern, you know, tech level 10. So there are worlds of all variety out there. Anyway, today we are going to world build the world that we are having our campaign on. We're going to take it slow, of course, but hopefully we'll get a lot done. So we'll get right to that. Here we are. So we have a bit of information that we already have that we generated before, assuming I can find it. Okay, it's higher up in the list then, I suppose. It's one of these, I think. No. What is this? Yeah, well, I mean, if it's on this sheet, you probably saw me make it more than likely, but that doesn't mean I remember it. Is this my kingdom? No. Maybe? Can't be. Hmm. Sorry, I got distracted trying to figure out what this is. I know this isn't where we are, but a capitalist feudal dictatorship, which makes me think empire for some reason. Perhaps because that's generally our government system, sort of. There's variance allowed and all that. Not always is the feudal tag attached. Sometimes it's monarchy or other such things. Perhaps this is an old variant of it. No, yes, it is my capital system, but it is a old variant because I was working on stats and so forth in another file and all that. Technically, most of these should be around 70. Don't ask me how I got that number. I mean, I say that, but let's be honest. Um, I could go into depth about how I got that number. I didn't just come up with that number. I didn't just go, 70 right now. I mean, if you know how we work around here, I'm not sure I really explained it. I know that my players know. I am very, when working on Galactic Requiem, rules oriented. In that sense, I mean, I almost, I say almost never, it's basically never just throw numbers out there when I'm working on something. I almost always do research and follow systems the way they work. Basically, coming to the result using mathematics and in-game systems and comparisons that actually come out to those numbers. I very seldom just go, oh, yes, I think I'll give this thing a stat of this. There's always law and rules and mechanics and everything behind it. Which, I mean, now that we're on the tangent, I suppose we talked about this a little bit. I've been working on nation modification and all that. The reason that my little kingdom has 70 in its stats, which may sound like a lot, but it's not. I mean, it sounds like a lot when you see that this is like 12. Let's see. I have to bring up the nations file real fast. So if you know how it all works, which I assume none of you do, no offense, it's just because, it's not like these files are out there for people, At least not yet. But so, it's not like, oh, you don't know. It's you don't have access to the file, of course, so the only way to understand is for me to explain it, really. Here we are. Did I go too far? I went too far. Keep scrolling to the wrong section. Here we are. So, the reason my nation stats are at about 70 is because, here we are. Of course, as you know, I'm an imperial lord. which doesn't necessarily have to do with, I mean, just the status of being an imperial lord doesn't have to do with this per se, but the empire being one of the most advanced nations and so forth. A lower midline nation has about 20s in its stats. On all 5 to 6, about 20. So, obviously, as you can see, having 12s is not even 12s and a 14. I mean, that I assume is there because of the base. So, nations start at base 10, okay? From base 10, you see these mods. These mods are added based on your government type, which is exactly what these numbers just are. They're the mods. So you start at base 10, then you add your government modifiers. And from there, let me open my file back up. Well, that's the base. From there, we of course have actual tiers. For instance, having 20s in your stats, well, obviously then plus modifiers, is basically what we considered, and I quote, lower midline package. Lower mid nations have the basic development and have been around for a while, longer than somebody who's at base 10 stats, but these are considered the colonies of major nations. From there, we go to true midline package, a developed mid-tier nation, the developed colonies of major nations. Slightly more developed governments, still generic, but has a few megacities and such, so forth. So those have about 30 in their stats. Of course, being part of the most advanced nation around, you can understand that, of course, my systems are not developed colonies, So what's a step up from there? Upper midline. Instead of normal midline, upper midline is long-standing developed mid-tier nations. Basically what you would consider council sub-nations, more advanced governments, or a basic world or system in a major nation. Not a colony, a basic world in a major nation. And it has stats about 40 before modifiers. So we're getting there. That's still not imperial standard. That's a basic world of a major nation. So we're not even at imperial standard. Next is more just generic steps. There's less descriptions, but here we go. 10 higher than that. So about 50 in the stats. You're looking at major nation, important worlds. We're not even looking at capitals. We're looking at just important worlds of major nations. Things that are, hey, that world is relatively of note. And that's 50 in its stats. Then the next step up is 60 in its stats. These are basic high-tier nation. Also, major nation system capitals. A system capital being the capital world of a system. Not a sector, not a subsector, a system. So, singular world in one star system, you're looking at 60. For a major nation, obviously not a lesser nation, they'd probably have slightly lower stats. And then 70, you are looking at developed high-tier nation, also known as, well, also equivalent to a major nation hub, or important world of a major nation, a hub world of a major nation. Not even a capital, just a hub world of a major nation. You're looking at, let's see, 40 plus 30, so 70. You're looking at 70 for a hub world of a major nation. Of course, being an imperial law, my world's about equivalent-ish, perhaps even one higher. I forget what my stats, I'd have to double check the book, but as you can see, that's why we arrive at about 70, because a hub world of imagination, roughly equivalent to a standard imperial sort of world. We'll continue up the line though. 80, you're looking at long-standing high-tier nation, above standard major nation world, a system with a eucumnopolis or megastructure, a major nation subsector capital. So a capital world that's ruling over about, well, a subsector system that's ruling over about 10 other systems, has about 80. Next step up is 90 in all the stats, which is roughly a major nation flat out, high tier major nation world, fully industrialized systems with multiple ecumenopolises or megastructures, major nation sector capitals. The capital of an entire sector of about 100 subsectors. That is 90. And then at 100 is a legendary nation, unified Dyson swarms of major nation system capitals, which is 100, which is the highest you can go. Of course, there's ups and downs within it because it's variable. And then there's just maximum, which is flat out 100 in everything. Not every object, but all the stats, which is basically considered a peak nation. Imperial royalty and archdukes, the ancient nations at their height, entire collections of advanced worlds. So, that's basically the rough equivalence, which is why I believe mine equate out to like 70. We can actually check that, why not? I mean, we're going to be working on nation stats and so forth, so I don't feel too off topic talking about all this. I mean, I am a little embarrassed talking about all this. Of course, it's always a bit embarrassing talking about myself and my nation. But you just need to push through that sort of thing. I mean, I am an Imperial Lord. It's my right to ramble about such things and so forth. Here we are. I know it's somewhere. Did I store it in a different file? Perhaps. Unfortunate. One second. Sorry about that. Looking through a lot of files as fast as possible. Can't find it. Not going to waste your time looking for it anymore. But needless to say, it's about 70 in the numbers or so. I don't have it in front of me. But yes. So it's not really the top line. I mean, that's my overall score, I believe. But yes, it's not the toppest line nation, especially with the output of 3 star systems. But of course, the more star systems you have, the stats don't matter too much. They also fall off at distance. The modifiers, the further away something is, fall off. So, you know. Anyway, at least we now know what we're looking at here. I also had a calculation of my full income, which was like a lot of Galactic Standard credit units. Which is why one says, as Imperial Lord, I mean, you can just draw a credit unit out of your bank and then bam. But that's not what we're looking for. Where is it? I was looking at it just the other day. I was preparing. I'm like, do we have any information? Here it is. It has to be here. Nope. Okay. 1 second more. My apologies. I'm not even looking for mine at this point. We're just looking for the one that's of this world we're supposed to be working on. Here it is. Yes, perfect. This is exactly what we're looking for. This is the only information we have on this sector that we are in, that we are going to be world building today. But now that you have a loose basis of the way these stats work, we can actually work on those. So, comparatively, for no, careful. Don't want to accidentally select everything there. Here we are. So, now that you have a loose basis of the way the stats work, it should not shock you, and you should understand why the system we are working on has stats of 30, give or take. Yeah, 30. Could be higher. Is this a capital or a? So I didn't really go over it in all ramblings. But the way stats work, specifically for nations, is they are maintained on a per world basis. Sort of. They go all the way up to a per subsector basis, sort of. It's complex. We'll talk about it. I need to bring up the file for that, though, if we're going to talk about it. Here we are. So, nations. So, of course, we talked about what each thing's rough stats could be. For instance, mine being about 70 for my overall nation. Technically, my capital's like 100 in its stats if you want to be technical. But then you'll see why I say that in half a second. A nation can have higher than what you would expect. Of course, the maximum is 100, but you can have higher than what one would expect. Because, and I quote, Assuming I can find it. Skill bonus mods from buildings and or districts are by world. However, so your stat modifiers are from a world, be it from buildings or policies, projects, etc. They are by world. However, a system administration hub and a subsector administration hub let you use skill bonus mods on a larger scale as per their individual rules. So stats and skill mods are by world base. So you set up your policies, projects, buildings, whatever you're doing modifier-wise, then you divide that by 10 and apply it to the scale higher. So if your world has, let's say your core world, has stats of 100, and you wanted to mess with a different system, you're trying to affect another system. Sorry, I got my tiers wrong. That's one tier up. Let's retry that. Your world wants to affect another world within your system. Without a subsector administration, system administration hub, your world's stats are 10 instead of 100. That's applied within the system. Once you get a system administration hub, it lets you use your full thing. And then 1/10, so what you would do then, the way it works is, of course, you probably have multiple colonized worlds. You add up the modifiers of all your worlds. For instance, world A, B, and C in system have a +13, a +7, and a +6 in skills. If you wanted to use this system's stats within the subsector, so another system, one FTL lane away, they'd be using a +3 because you'd add it all together and then divide by 10. 0.5 rounds up and lower than 0.5 rounds down. But basically, you add all the worlds together, divide by 10 to get your next total. And then there's by subsector. Of course, 1/10 of the subsector's mods are applied within the sector. So what you do is you add together all of your systems in the subsector, all up to about around 10 of them, divide by 10, and then apply that to, the next subsector over and so forth. And so, and by every step over, like if you want to affect something 2 subsectors over, you're getting a -4 and so forth. Of course, a capital world has special abilities. For instance, a capital world uses half, if you declare it a capital and upkeep it anyway, it uses half its mod when determining the total. So you would, instead of, so if the stats are 100, instead of dividing by 10, you divide that one world by 2. And then you'd add all together and do everything else the same, but your capital world is divided by 2 instead of 10. Also, your capital world doesn't take a -2 penalty per distance. It takes a -1 penalty per distance. Anyway, this entire system, it's easier to do than to explain, as things almost always are. But in short, a world, depending on what tier we're talking about, for a nation, its worlds could have higher stats. That also translates to a sense of, explanation of what that means exactly. So, when it says plus 50, so 40, 90. So a total of 90, which was what we considered a major nation amount of stat, also known as a fully industrialized system with multiple ecumenopolises or megastructures or major nation sector capitals. So for a major nation sector capital, that would imply that multiple worlds, because a sector capital is a subsector scale object, so it would imply that that subsector has several worlds with maxed out stats, enough that, or at least enough stats within the subsector's worlds that if you divide the capital by 2 and then divide everything else by 10, add it up, it should equal about 90. Once more, it's easier to actually do than to explain. I'm terrible at explaining this sort of thing. But in a sense, you have to look at the scale you're talking about, and then you basically figure out what each world within it is. So while it's like, yes, this is a lower tier nation, do they control multiple worlds? What is their overall tier? And then you divide and so forth and figure out what each individual world would be. So that's sort of how that works. In short, given that this is a sort of, well, rural world, a colonized rural world, its stats are honestly probably, as we said, probably a 30. It's not well developed. I know all that roundabout just to say that, but you know. So, but I mean, it matters in some cases. By the way, the way you get up your stats currently, so skills, you just build buildings. Stats, like your actual nation's stats, are raised via looking at the right terminology. We use specific terminology. Projects, policies, and programs. Projects, policies, and programs have a variety of effects. One of the effects that they generally have are the ability to increase your stats at the cost of upkeep. And there's ways to waive that upkeep, and there's a lot of different systems in nation running. Of course, we still need to work on projects, policies, and programs, and edicts and decrees. As I've mentioned before, currently it's very freeform, but we at least need, and it's supposed to be freeform, but we need slightly better examples of what each thing does. So we need a list of template edicts and decrees and so forth. Anyway, enough of that. So we have some information on our area. Orbiting the Chthonian world of insert name here. The view from Moon 3. That's the moon we're on. Brings many tourists who seek to see Chthonian world's vast glowing lava seas and rivers above. The magnetics of Chthonian world cause a brilliant display of aurora in the magnetosphere and in the magnetosphere of Moon 3. Many seek to see the many eruptions that occur on the Chthonian world, and a common hobby is to watch the debris from the eruptions burn up in the atmosphere and to try and find any debris that made it through the atmosphere. And that's where we are. Object 7, Moon 3. Unfortunately, due to the way it's not really unfortunate, honestly. It's there for a reason. But it does mean we have to do a little bit of math. There are 15 moons. So we are, as stated, let's actually get into the meat of it now. We are world building the nation we're on. We're world building the sector, subsector, system, planet, etc. So first things first, we are on a moon. It really, I'm thinking, so how much do we want to break physics? The problem is, I unfortunately, I mean, you might too, know enough about space to know, first off, yes, we have a bit too many moons, sort of. Not really, it really depends on, I mean, we're in orbit of a Chthonian planet. For those of you who don't know what a Chthonian planet is, it is a gas giant. Sort of. We'll get there. A Chthonian world, this is, mind you, this is off the top of my head. Not made up off the top of my head, but remembering off the top of my head. A Chthonian world is a gas giant that has had its gas stripped from wandering too close to the star that it generally orbits. So a former gas giant with its layers stripped. Also, it's wild. I mean, if you consider, sorry, little astronomy tangent here. Gas giants, quite amazing. And ice giants too. But gas giants have a bit more of what I'm about to mention because of the way they work. So, in a gas giant, you have the gas, yes, but below that, I forget the exact layers. It's been a long time. But there's like a layer on the surface, above the surface technically, of liquid metallic hydrogen. Yes, liquid metallic hydrogen. What? Yes, that's insane. It's amazing. A layer of it's just it's one of those things that makes me so happy that physics works the way it works. Now, I'm not an astrophysicist. I just studied astronomy back in the day. The basics, not the math aspects, just the basics. I mean, a little bit about stellar fusion, proton-proton chains, and, the way stars burn with fusion and all that. But that's some of the most complex. I say complex, but that's like the most numbers physicsy thing we went into. But like, I mean, I suppose there was a bit more math, like luminosity and Roche limits and other such things, so there was a bit of math, but it wasn't, it wasn't astrophysics, it was astronomy. But in short, my point is, there's some crazy things in space, and I have some idea of what we do wrong. I know what we do wrong, but I mean, we use different physics than you Elysians, so. One thing I don't know, we didn't really cover it in astronomy, really. What happens when you get a Chthonian world to the liquid metallic hydrogen? I assume it dissipates or something? because there's no way you can maintain liquid metallic hydrogen without the pressure. At least I'm pretty sure you can't maintain liquid metallic hydrogen without the pressure. The pressure from all the atmosphere above that creates it, basically. So, assumedly it disappears once you have a Chthonian world. As, the layers of gas all stripped, thus decreasing the pressure on the planet. Anyway. In short, we break physics. Sometimes. Often. On occasion, sort of. It's complicated. But, so, I'm getting way off topic. The entire point of this little set of rambling was to say is, how much do we want to break basic physics here? And by that, I mean, so this is a Chthonian world, meaning it was a gas giant, meaning its largest moons. I mean, it can have rather large moons, let's be honest. I could probably bring up I have a sheet somewhere. It can have rather large moons. Do we want to make the moon Earth scale or not? That's the real question. Or do you want to make the moon, like, actually moon-sized? And I don't mean like your Elysian moon, I mean like, moons. Let's see here. We actually have a book for that. Random generators. Yes, it's under the random generator book. Because the random generator book contains a section for randomly generating worlds and codes for those star systems. Similar to the traveler codes. Here we are. Scrolling, sorry. Looking for the section on world sizes. Here we are. World sizes. One moment. Hmm. Here we are. So basically, in short, one another second looking at scale calculations. Hmm. Okay, we have to do a bit of math here. Trying to see how big we could make it feasibly. I mean, up to scale 8 world, of course. Probably don't want to go larger than that. Doing math. Really? Interesting. Okay, so we're looking at a feasible scale of, say, 3, maybe 4. 4 seems like it's pushing it. Like scale 2 is fine. Scale 3, possible. Scale 4 is pushing it. And of course, your home world of like Earth, what we call Aldalesia, is scale 8. Do you want to make this world scale 8? I mean, it would be pushing physics, but you know. It's not like it matters. So yeah, total moons is about 1/10 the volume of the planet, or so. If that's true, 1.2, 0.125. Huh, interesting. Bit more math? Sorry, we got sidetracked. I didn't expect to be doing math like this today. That's not right. I did my math wrong there. Theoretically, I don't know the exact volume, if you will, of a Chthonian world. Don't think there's lots of examples of volume of Chthonian worlds. I could be wrong, but I don't have one. So I have to estimate and then divide by 10, then divide by 15. But it looks like if we want to be somewhat realistic, and given the fact that there's 15 objects and that you should have roughly 1/10 volume of moons limited for total, we're looking at perhaps, if there's 15 of them and they're all roughly the same size, of course you could have smaller or larger, in which case that shifts the numbers. We're looking at 15 worlds up to the size of Mercury, also, for a lower estimate, by the way. I am assuming here several things. For instance, like I said, I don't specifically have the details of the volume of a Chthonian world, but assuming a mid-tier Hellion world or Helian world has a volume of about 3.375 Earths. That's volume Earths. So, I believe, if I'm reading that right. So, assuming that, then likely, if that's a mid-sized Helian, and if we assume that a Chthonian is similar to a Helian, given that it's a gas giant with stripped atmosphere, then with that, we can likely have 15 or so moon-sized worlds. If we assume a bit higher in volume, we could get to 15 Mercury-sized worlds, which I will assume, because that's a midline Helian, that we could get higher and could have a 15 Mercury-sized worlds, theoretically speaking. Of course, none of this is using normal physics, by the way. This isn't physics or anything. This is separate, vague calculation stuff. This is the simple calculations. Like, I don't want to have to do math when generating star systems, you know? Oh, sorry about that. This is the less math option, and you see it's full of math. Of course, like, once it's all generated, it doesn't really matter to players or anything. This is just for us, honestly. But basically, the point is, we could break physics and just say size 8. I mean, it doesn't really matter. We break physics all the time. We work on different physics than you, so I mean, you know. But let's look at this. Let's actually look at what I'm talking about. Why not? Please tell me I have it set up. I probably don't have it set up. But, you know. It's either this one or the one below it. It's the one below it. And I probably don't have it, which is unfortunate. Yes, I don't have it. Okay. So this is, of course, a size 20 world. The largest possible that we can really use here. I mean, if we could make larger. It's not like it's impossible, but it's the largest we do scale-wise, because traveler maps. Let's do the math. 9, 10. It's massive. It is 20,000 miles in diameter. Is this. That's not the world we're doing, but that's what the largest scale of world available is. 20,000, by the way, in diameter. 20,000 miles in diameter. If I am doing my math right, which I might not be. is larger than many Jovians. Perhaps? I'd have to double check that. Now I have to know, because it's going to bug me if I don't. Because I might be thinking, the way it's based on somewhat like the Traveler scale of world thing, and the thing lists it as Jovian, but that might not be accurate, so now I need to know. So give me a second. I like being accurate when it comes to space. Not necessarily. I like knowing when I'm breaking rules, you know? You know what I mean? Here we are. Jupiter. One thing that annoys me is it's annoying to find the diameter of these things. I know you can math it out, but why do we have to math it out? Why do they only ever give us the radius? You know? Okay, here we go. Time to do some math. They've given us the radius, and we need to get that to a diameter. Alright, 2 radius, easy enough. I just wish we didn't have to do it. Okay, so it is wrong. They were wrong. That should be 88 miles? Really? 88,000, that is. Yes, if the equatorial radius is 44, it should be 88 also. Then why did they call that a Jovian? That's weird. That's annoyingly weird. Yeah, that is genuinely weird. I'm slightly annoyed by that. Okay. While we're here, let's update our book. My apologies. What is your radius? I really wish that they would stick to some form of consistency. The other one gave it to me in miles. This one's giving it to me in kilometers. About 50,000, okay. Nope, that's kilometers, I need to convert. 31,000. Okay, so we're looking at about 31,000 versus 88 also. So that would be a size 30. Really? And Jupiter would be a size 88 world. Interesting. Okay, now that that little confusion is wrapped up, there's one other thing I want to check. Yeah, I don't know why. They just listed it wrong. Okay. Okay. I mean, if we're being technical, size 20 is almost the size of Neptune. Almost. If I'm doing my math right. Because they have a radius of about 31. This is radius 20. I know it's like 10,000 difference, but it's as close as it gets. Then again, 10,000 is a lot of difference in miles, you know? Anyway. So we're looking at sorry, one more second. Okay. There's another section that has the diameters, but they are in kilometers, which just threw me off there for a second. Okay. But yes, we don't really have an example for we don't really have an example for a size 20 world that I can give. I mean, it's of course smaller than Neptune, but bigger by a lot than like Earth. Anyway, we're not even working on a size 20. We're just rambling. Here we are. So yeah, that's size 20, 19, 18, and so forth. Could put a lot of things on one of these worlds. Every square, by the way, on this map, I say square, hex. Every hex is about, if I remember the math calculation, every hex is about 1,000 kilometers. Then why does it give it to... Sure, sure, okay, fine, yes. That's... Forgive me, I'm simply being annoyed at the existence of maths and different units. So they decided to give us the diameter in miles. But the actual squares are measured in kilometers. Because reasons. Reasons I can't fathom. But for some reason it works out. I'm pretty sure. Now I'm doubting that, but best not to do that. In short, every square is about 1,000 hex. I'm used to normal maps. Every hex is about 1,000 kilometers or so. Anyway, we might go with the size 8, which we have a spare of right here. Either that or we're going with the smaller scale, which we can. I say I don't have it. It's more I don't have it prepared. Let's say we wanted to do the accurate thing, you know? Let's say we wanted to make it about Mercury in scale, which is a size 3 world. What we would do is we'd go over to here, you grab a size 3 world, one second, I forgot to do the math. $15. I believe that would be accurate if I have done my math right. Which we can check, because luckily this one is no. It's not inaccurate, it's just the grid's messed up. There we are. Now the grid shouldn't be broken. Or the grid's still going to be broken. That's lovely. Try again. Nope, no, that's even worse. Here we are. It's off by a step. Well, it's not important. It's scaled enough, like we can solve that easily. But as you can see, this is roughly the size difference between a scale 8 world and a scale 3 world. If we make the world we're on a scale 3 world, it's not going to be a lot of space to work with. I'm curious now. What are the rules in regards to that? A size 8 world is 1 volume. That's not ideal. So yeah, we'd really be breaking the setup if we did that, but let's work on more easier things to work on that don't involve such concerns. I suppose we kind of need to know what scale of world we want to do. I mean, let's be honest. Let me double check to make sure I'm saying this right. When we say small, these squares I've highlighted here, these 4 squares, that's the length of your West Elysian continent. I believe you call it America or something. These 4 are the length of the continental United States, northern United States. 4 squares. So when we, of course, we say a small world, you understand that on something Earth-sized, that's like that much, and there's a lot of water and so forth. And so it's not entirely small, but also brings the question, how long? A lot. Very, very long. So, of course, it would not contain the entire thing. Is that even right? Trying to convert map projections onto here is difficult because, if you know how map projections work, you know that it gets annoying. Anyway, let's actually work on work. Let's bring up our sheet. Here we are. First of all, let us actually note the tier. That one is going to be listed. Trying to remember the name of the scale. It was a not lower midline. Was it? Yes. No, no, no. It was a true midline package that we chose. 30 in its stats, yes. Oh, nope. That's not ideal. Let's fix that. Sometimes I forget that this format's weird due to the way we do this. There, now if we do this, it shouldn't break. Okay, I'll be right back, my apologies, and then we'll actually get some work done. Okay. Let's try and make some actual progress. I can tell you I already hate this. Not the system, there's a reason. Which we're going to fix. We're going to make this far better to my... And we can't do it on this section. No, can we? We can't. Good. I'm gonna switch it to size 6 font. I think I've mentioned that before. It's just my preference for formatting to work on size 6 font. Okay. So yes, true midline package. Well, it's technically not what it's called though. Let's double check. I believe it's developed mid-tier nation. What's the official terminology we use? That's the real question. Okay. Yes, it is just midline or true midline is the proper terminology we use in the other book. Okay, good. Now, this is one of those times where we have a choice to waive something or not, and we are going to. We are going to waive a certain fact. Because it doesn't have too much impact, really. We'll affect it using this little system of tags. So, technically, the world we're on, as you can see, has 2 nations at war on it. And as you can see, it's a disunified, multi-nation government. That means that technically there are multiple governments. There being multiple governments, meaning there would or should be multiple government scores. A nation's stats are for a singular nation. Most worlds, when they deal with the outside world, are unified enough that they count as a singular thing. I say most important worlds. As this world technically has multiple nations, they each should have their own stats. We're not going to do that. It doesn't really affect much. I mean, it theoretically can affect a lot, but for what we're doing, it's not too important. In general, both nations will roll as if their stats are 30. If there's anything above or lower, we can modify that using tags. These tags will basically just be like, oh yes, they get a minus in this or plus in this, as opposed to doing an entire sheet for each one. Which we could, but we're not going to. Much as how we can decide whether each nation is a producer, consumer, hub, or standard transit system to determine the amount of imports and exports it has of any given object. We could do that. Why? Why would we? We're not running a trade campaign. If we were running a trade campaign, I would do that. If we were robbing trade caravans, I say caravan, I mean more, fleets of starships and so forth. I would look into the imports and exports if it mattered. But we get back to that traveler statement of map only is really necessary. And it's really, I say map only is really necessary. That's what they call it because they use it for mapping. But you should use it as an outlook in general, if you ask me. So stat only is really necessary, and we really don't need to go into exactly which imports and exports they have on this world, at least not right this moment. We can always do that if it comes up. Okay. So, true midline, those are its rough stats. 10s in each skill, 10 building bonuses. We'll assume their governments are maximum because it costs what? We could assume their governments are average, but we could also assume their governments are maximum. Having a maximum government on a world isn't that hard. A maximum government costs math time. $60. I say bucks, let's be honest. 60 credit units. And all 600 billion galactic standard credits. Or for you Elysians out there, $600 billion also every week. It's not yearly, that's a week to run a maximized government. As you can see, it's not necessary. A maximized government, by the way, the only benefit to a maximized government is they are rolling at a 26. It is not necessarily ideal to max. This is per planet, by the way. So it's not necessarily ideal to maximize your government on every world. There's really not a need to. You want at least one world with a maximized government, and you want at least an additional world with maximized government every so often. Because, as was mentioned, distance affects your modifiers. And so, technically, you can just roll your capital government's thing at a -1 per distance unit, and it works out. But, so, the reason I say, so 60 credit units a week. If I said day before, my apologies, it's a week. The output you gain via taxes, let's say you have maximized efficiency. This is not counting your end of year budget, by the way. You're earning, if you absolutely maximize things, about 3 credit units per person. Well, per pop unit. A pop unit of 1 billion people. So your average world with 10 billion people is earning 30 credit units, which is half every week. It's earning 30 credit units every week, which is half of what it takes to run a government at maximum. So you see, and that's, by the way, that's not mentioning other expenses. Of course, you need to fund your military, you need to fund projects, you need to buy things, you need an excess of income. So you would need multiple worlds with 10 billion people with maximum efficiency outputting to get a maximized government. As you can see, It's not worth it to have every world to have a maximized government. After all, it is only a -1 for your core world per distance unit for their skills and stats. It's also -2 if it's not a core world. If it's not your capital, it's a -2. So it's a -2 per distance. With a system administration hub, you can do that via system, so every FTL lane away is an additional -2. And if they're maximum, they have a 26. So you have some leeway of distance measurement for, you know, government having certain amount of tiers and so forth. Hence, it's not ideal to have every single planet have a maximized government. Like, technically, I guess one could say if every planet has a maximized government, you're not taking a penalty at all per world, but think of the costs. The costs are so high, eventually you're going to go into the negative, or you're going to need populations of like 30 billion to have an excess. Yeah, you'd have to have a population of about 30 billion to have an excess for one planet to run its own government at maximum. Because if you have a population of 30 billion, you're looking at 90? With a maximized economy, you're looking at like 90 credit units. 90 credit units minus 60 leaves you 30 credit units left over to manage your military, manage funding other systems, purchase things, purchase just, the excess you need to run a nation. Of course, at the end of the year, you get your end of year budget, which depends on your economics. So, of course, there's additional funding at the end that you can use on a variety of things, but point is, but you only get that every year. But it's a reasonable amount, so. Let's say you rolled average of 16, by the way. Times 12, I believe. Times 10. Meaning with a 10 billion pop, if I've done my math right, if you roll a low 16, you're looking at an additional 1,920 credits for the year. 1,920. Is less than it takes to run a maximized government. So you see there's balance and math and all that involved. But in short, you don't want maximized governments necessarily. Let's see, if we did a half government, which is level 10, they'd be getting 16 on their checks. And it would only cost 5 times 6 for a total of 30 credits. 30 credit units per week. Which is barely what a maximized government can handle. A maximized economy can handle with 10 billion people. Then you get your extra money from end of year, and that looks a lot more feasible. Technically, you could run a minimized government. You only need, like, level 2 costs 1, okay? So the minimum level's 2, by the way. You could run a government for as low as six credit units. And they'd be getting a total of 8 on their rolls. You could run an absolutely minimum government, which gives you penalties. I believe it means you'd be rolling at your flat level. I believe. So you'd be rolling at a 2. If I'm doing my math right, I'd have to double check the nation rules. Because nations have different ministries, basically. These ministries have different things that they give you bonuses and penalties on. Not really penalties, they just give you bonuses, flat out bonuses. But they can't do other ministries' work, except for the core ministry. Assuming I can find it. Here we are. There are 6 ministries. There's the core ministry, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of the Treasury, I suppose, the Ministry of Science, and the Ministry of Intelligence. Intelligence not being smartness, Ministry of Intelligence being espionage. Anyway, core ministry can operate at, yeah, it's just at its base level. It can operate any other ministry at -6. You have to have a core ministry at least. Sort of. Technically, without a core ministry, you can technically run a government at -20 on all checks. And you literally can't do anything else. So you basically need a core ministry. But you could have a basic level 2 core ministry, meaning you're going to be taking a you'd be rolling at 2. I believe. It's slightly unclear whether you'd be rolling at 2 or -4. It doesn't specify, unfortunately. I should probably fix that terminology. But for now, let's assume 2. For 1 credit. For 1 credit a week. You could be rolling with a 2. On anything. Of course, core-based ministry things would be rolling at a total of 8. But every other ministry's operations would be rolling at a 2. A level 1 ministry of any others, by the way, would be rolling at its 8, so that's why it's better to have them. But theoretically, you can run a government for 1 credit unit, or 10 billion Galactic Standard credits a week. Which we're not going to do. We don't need to know the amount they're spending on things right now, honestly. Theoretically, we could also use the lesser nation rules. By that, I mean, as there are multiple nations on one planet, what we could do is figure out what their population scale is, and then figure out what what's the word I'm looking for? Sub-governmental nation scale thing we would be working on. For instance, there are smaller scale that goes to 1 pop unit is 1 million people. And then there's 1 pop unit is 10 million people. 1 pop unit is 100 million people. And then standard scales, 1 pop unit is 1 billion people. So, there are lesser scales that you can work with for, say, campaigns or things that take place on a singular, like your TL10 Elysia. And then, you can separate Elysia into different spheres, North Elysia, South Elysia, East Elysia, and West Elysia. Which is what you Elysians do separate it into. So, basically, those would be in the hundreds of millions category. If you really wanted, you could separate it into smaller countries as opposed to spheres. And then, in which case, depending on which country, you're looking at 10 million to 1 million population scale units. Hell, you can have multiple scales on one planet. Like, you can have different scales. And there's a way to convert, like, a smaller scale just has a penalty and the money's worth less. Like you literally divide by a number. It's real simple. But it tracks basically easily all the way up. Like, it works. You don't need to change anything, really. Point being, since there are multiple nations in this world, they probably don't have billions of pop. You could probably make it less and so forth. We're not making nation sheets for them, though. We're just getting a rough equivalent so we can deal with things. Hmm. Let's make a copy. There we are. Now we can actually edit this copy. Now let's think. I kind of wanted to work on the map. But we really honestly need to decide on a scale if I want to do that. That's not entirely true. We can go to here, load this up. Here's what we'll do. Map, copy. Terminations World Hex map. Here we are. Make sure our scales are right. Terrain and single, world and local. Okay, that's unfortunate. This is going to annoy me. No, no. I made it so much worse. Please. I'm sorry. It really doesn't matter, honestly. But I like getting it accurate. Perfect. Now, distance between them doesn't really matter too much, just that they're aligned. So this is a world hex. If this is a world hex, then one of these, one major square, is 1,000 kilometers across. Meaning, let's make sure. I'm going to be annoyed if I'm not sure. Random generators. World map generation. A square is a world hex. A world hex is made up of 1,000 kilometers. Terrain hexes within the world hex are 100 kilometers. So every one of these is 100. Then that should be 10. No. 100. So this is 100. That's 10. This is 10. That's 1. Oh, yes. So the next scale would be one of these here. And this would be 10 kilometers made up of 100. No, sorry, it would be 1 kilometer made up of 100-meter subsquares. Okay. So this is 100 kilometers, every subsquare. Now let's get to work. So we are going to make the war zone that we're in. Sort of. Let's switch to object layer. Let's grab towns. We're going to need a few of those. Let's grab suburbs. We're going to need a few of those. Let's grab rural. And city. There we go. It is... I think they're northeast-ish. So we are over here. Let's grab another important little thing. Which is some arrows. Please. Snapping things on a map with no snap is annoying. So the borders around here... Nope, this is 100 kilometers. I keep forgetting the scale we're at. Because I was working on one of these maps earlier with a different scale. Let's start with 110. 10 kilometers. This is the scale we want to be working with. So we'll be around there. No. This is 10 kilometers, if I'm right. No, that's not. This is 1,000, so that's 100. This is 100. So that's 10. Okay, no, we are right. There should be another city around here. There should be. Let me make sure my distance is right. 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, so here's what we'll do. This should be here, actually. Meaning, we'll go like so. There's the city that they're fighting over. There's a city over here. Let's go to our war map. Assuming I can find it. Here we are. Okay, luckily this is in feet, so we can measure it easily. Well, assuming we do this, otherwise it'll be Measured weird. 13,000, almost 14,000. We'll round up 14,000. Length. $4 kilometers to the town. Straight south from there's 4 kilometers to the town. And 10 kilometers to the city. 4 kilometers to the town, 10 kilometers to the city. So there should be an allied city about there. And there should be an allied town. Please stop lagging. There we are. And there should be an allied... Oh, please. There we are. There should be an allied town like here. Okay. So that's a basic start of our map. Sort of. That's the city they're fighting over. That's sort of. That's where one of the rare cities is. That's where we are. So what we need to do is also map out. So I can find the right section. Borders, no. Traveler, here we are. Rough woods. And woods. Here we are. We know that just beyond the border is a bunch of heavily wooded areas. We got lost in them last time. They are technically traversable, but it's not ideal. Like so. Just beyond the border is these heavy woods. About 40 kilometers of them even. Likely there's probably small towns and so forth in them. Not in the central area, but in the areas around it that are marked as normal. Town there. Let's have a little bit of fun. And drop a river. There we are. So a river runs around there. There we are. The river. then goes this way. And ends in, well, starts in more so. So we can find the right image here. Mountains. And these will be a rather large range that sort of just goes off. Like so. There we are. Goes off over here somewhere. However, ooh, fun. Very fun. Rough woods and a marsh. Few kilometers of marsh. Kind of want it like that. We're actually world building, as in, building a world. So yeah, a few kilometers of marsh up near the mountain range. Ooh. Let's have some more fun. No, we want this lake marker. That one implies it's slightly smaller. This one implies it's larger. Because I want multiple kilometers of lake. There, we have a really large sort of lake that it's going to feed into. And the lake will actually separate into two more rivers. One heading off this way, and one that sort of heads off that way and actually splits around here. Would you look at that? We're starting to have a bit of a landscape here. I also want to place a marker, if I can find one. Token mark. Here we are. That one will do. So, we'll zoom in here. Switch to our token layer. Grab this, place that, add a halo, make it blue. Size, -4. That's where we are. Actually, if you want to be technical, let's be technical. We're all working on an accurate-ish map, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. We are in a megacity for being, well, it's not really even a megacity, it's just sort of, it's on the line, let's be honest. Yeah, that's about what we're looking for city scale-wise. Every square being 10 kilometers. The city down here is supposed to be smaller. And, oh, this city's supposed to be rather large. And it's supposed to be on both sides. So we'll extend this one a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. One there. One there. I don't like it being entirely even. Just trying to get the right number of blocks out, you know? It's still even. No. Sort of. Let's see. Take from there, place there. Take from there. There, that's better. So that's the city they're sort of fighting over. There's this city. And this faction doesn't really have a city nearby, I'll be honest. Ten, 20, 30, 40. About 50 kilometers. These guys are like 30 kilometers away. But their nearest city, well, their nearest sort of, 70 kilometers. Doesn't matter too much. It's not like it needs to be even or anything. But let us give our side a city somewhere. No. Wrong button. There we are. Our side has a large city over here. Okay. Good stuff. Of course, we could do things on a smaller scale like this and make it more, you know, like theoretically. We can go like this and make an entire sub-map within a map, you know? Like place actual cities, make rivers run through them, and make it all fancy like that. I've done that before, but let's not do it this time. We just want an overview of the world. You know? So if we did move it over to here, at least sort of, like what would happen is any one of these squares would become one of these squares. And so this entire setup, like this entire thing, would fit on there. There'd be the center and basically the 7 squares would be, you know, like a small section of this one. And of course, on here, this is one step up. So yeah, this no, that's a step down. I'm getting my things backwards. So all of this on here would be one of these. All of this a step down. 3 of these, basically these, would be all of this. And then there's one more step down, of course, which is basically the same conversion. But that would be like 100 meters if we ever really wanted to go that specific, which you usually don't need to. And of course, every one of these squares is one of these. So that entire top view is that. Scaling and all that. Which you can see how if this is a section of that large map, and this is literally those, and this is literally those, then you see how there'd be so many of these, which is why Traveller has the statement map only is really necessary. Because it can get ridiculous. Scale-wise. So, we're not going to map an entire world, of course. We're just mapping where we are. Which is, yeah, up here, but, you know, we dealt with the war zone and all that, so. That's, so theoretically, I'm not sure if it's archived here, it might not have been, but basically, in our very early campaigns, we dealt with this stuff here. Technically, in our very, very early campaign, we went elsewhere and other places on the entire planet. Like, we were on entire different sections, you know? We can go anywhere, but you can see, like, map only is really necessary. And with just a little bit of work, of course, doing it live is a bit slower than doing it yourself. Theoretically. We could fill this out with lots more detail. Or not, and like, the entire point being, how do I put it? We can quickly throw these together, theoretically. There, I want it on that layer. And let's fix this. That's currently the border of the conflict. So we can, of course, make smaller variants, larger variants, work on any of that sort of thing, and basically add detail and all that to worlds. Basically make them as needed. But the point being, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. Now we have a loose overview of where we are in reference to the war and all that, which will help us make decisions and so forth. And of course, we'll build more. We might never see this map again. I mean, we intend to stay in the city, so we will. But my point being, like, we can go anywhere in the galaxy, theoretically speaking. Star maps, world maps, system maps, sector maps. For instance, I think we showed this once before. There's the GM work files. We can map out, basically the star would go there. Then we have the inner system. Star there. Inner system. And outer system. Just for distance measurements and so forth is what all this is for determining where things are in systems. And then from there, well, let's be a bit more specific. We have our standard scale, 5-foot squares, you know. Here we are in a part of the city. We then zoom out to, if it ever loads, 50-foot squares. We are here in regards to that. So we have our 50-foot squares. From there, we, of course, can zoom out to what would be this over here with 100-meter squares, basically these being 100 meters, and this being a kilometer. And then you go to here, where this is, let's see. This is a kilometer. This is 10 kilometers. This is 10 kilometers. This is 100 kilometers. This is 100 kilometers. This is 1,000 kilometers. And then you know, you get your world map where each square is 1,000 kilometers. You, of course, can do this with stations and such, too. And you can make rings, orbital rings and that sort of thing using these, and it works. And then from there, this being a world map, you then get your system map with multiple worlds would be laid along the line. Then from your system map, you get your sector map with your little one of these being a system. Then you go from your system to your subsector to your sector. And then, of course, one of these being a sector, megasectors, gigasectors, and the galaxy. So, you know, I love that we can zoom in on this and basically see, hey, here's little star systems. Because each one of these, each square is basically a light year. Not these ones, but like each sub-square is a light year, and then system and so forth. Basically, you know, as you can see, a sci-fi galaxy. There are theoretically multiple galaxies, but we don't deal with those. We just deal with the one galaxy that we're in because it's easier. And it's where it's where the campaign takes place. But yeah, players in different locations of the galaxy, different maps, different everything, basically. And what's great about the scales is we can have, of course, there's also space maps. But I'll be honest, space map isn't really a scale. How do I put that? Space maps have, scaling and distance and size. But space combat, where is it? Space combat is small. You can theoretically fight across a system. You can theoretically fight across a system. You can theoretically use FTL weapons to fire at long distance, but your average space engagement, a long-range space engagement, mind you, theoretically, like a very long-range space engagement, you could be fighting across a star system, I guess, but usually space engagements are in light seconds. Each square here is an AU. Any inner system square, however, is a tenth of an AU. So everything here is a tenth of an AU. Everything here is an AU. So usually a space battle will take place in 1 or 2 AU, and space is relatively empty. So space maps aren't really a standard scale, they're a ad hoc encounter map created as needed, Unless there's a close series of stations that you need to map out, which you can, then of course you can map out a close series of stations in a submap, and that might be important. Or an asteroid field. But you get my point, it's like not a travel scale. It's not a scale you really travel. You don't travel at light second scale. That's more ships encounter each other. So those come up as needed. As there's, 8 minutes in an AU. And so 60 times 8. So there's like 480 light seconds in one square. So you get my point, like you don't really need maps at that scale unless you're engaging in space. And even then, like, you can, but it's usually not important. Space battles usually take place in deep space. If there's things on the battlefield, you can place them, but it's not like, you get my point. It's not like you need the map prepared. But yeah, that's my point. There's lots of different scales, and we can zoom in and out, and we can theoretically go anywhere in the galaxy, map anything, basically. And these are great for overland warfare. I mean, every square here is 10 kilometers, so we could just, do this. Bam, Allied battalion. And as simple as that, you can have a war game on this scale. You can even zoom in, have a war game on this scale, have a war game on one square being 100 meters scale. We don't have that one set up, of course. It's easy to, but, You could do that. Or all the way down to 50-foot squares. Like you see with our map like this. Usually for something like this, we'll do squads of 10 to 50 per square or so, depending on how cluttered the combat's going to be. 10 to 50, yeah. And so, you have units moving on this scale. You can run war games. You can do full-on gang war engagements using stat blocks and units. And that's why I love Galactic Requiem. There's nothing we can't do. Like I always say, it sounds cheesy, simulating a sci-fi universe. But that's sort of what we do. We simulate a sci-fi universe. We here haven't gotten into it yet. And by that, I mean, like, we haven't shown a lot of the overarching stuff. As I mentioned, I want to do that at some point. I want to introduce you all to the just many different options available. I want to show you the war game aspects. I want to show you empire management. I want to show you organization management of small businesses and so forth. I want to show you all that stuff. But currently, I feel like we're working on Juliana Aldous' adventures. Seeing where they take us, world building a city, looking at the small scale, I feel like we need to spend a lot of time getting accustomed to the small scale before we do larger scale stuff. I want to show you all the average player scale, There are players who run fleets, there are players who run businesses, there are players who run organizations and nations. But I just think it's important to start with a character, And then from there, we'll move to other stuff. I mean, some stuff will come up naturally. Like, I want to have Juliana Aldous work a lot on working with and improving the local gang she works with, which will give us, from a character perspective, a look on lesser organizations. And with those organizations, we might even take command of one, move into the organization scale. Or maybe we'll just work with them. Who knows? We already saw a bit of simplified mass combat. I think that was broadcast here. Maybe not. Might be archived. But we did a bit of simplified mass combat, which is very simple roles and so forth, as opposed to a complex mass combat, which is run more like a war game, which we could also do. But there's lots and lots for us to get into. And we will, over time, do everything. We'll build worlds, we'll build sectors, we'll run every aspect of Galactic Requiem, well, most aspects of Galactic Requiem. I mean, this is not a short-term thing we're doing. I mean, I've already been working on Galactic Requiem for years and years and years. And I intend to continue doing this stuff for the ever, basically. And we will bring it to you. As boring as it sometimes is, as action-packed as it sometimes is. And by the way, that's why I was starting tech level 8 and 9 aircraft. Because there are low-tech worlds. There are high-tech worlds. There are worlds with strange cultures out there. There are worlds of cities, worlds of forest, worlds of desert. There's everything out there in the galaxy. Everything for us to see. Everything for the Empire to conquer. Hell, that's a good idea. we might have at some point, campaign of me going about my business. Not a personal scale campaign, of course. I'm not going to share my personal day as an imperial lord. But we can watch my empire, my little 3-star systems, engage in vast fleet combats with armies of billions. And of course, as everything is, everything simply happens, like how to put it. If we have a campaign where I'm going about my empire management and grand scale strategy warfare stuff, that happens. That is in the game. That's lore. That's stuff that has occurred. As is what Juliana Aldous is doing in her little corner of the galaxy. As is what every player group does. It's all part of the greater Galactic Requiem. Let's see. So, unfortunately, we didn't get everything I wanted to get done. I wanted to work a bit on the maps. And we did. We made some progress on the map. We have a rough idea of where we are. That I wanted. So we hit a goal of the day. We could have done more on this, but there's no need to look at things and go, hey, we could always do better, you know? But we got part of what we wanted to get done, which is good. Next time is going to be Solo Sunday, or Miscellaneous Friday, but, you know, we do Tabletop RPG Sunday stuff. So, we'll continue the adventures of Juliana Aldous there with actual gameplay. Of course, more violent and reckless gameplay, but, you know. And, we'll try and work more on Worldbuilding on Worldbuilding Wednesdays. See, I've been over this before. There are a lot of aspects of work and world building in Galactic Requiem. Of course, there's writing descriptions. We could do that. There's making worlds. There's making systems that work together. There's statting things. There's actually using the systems. There's empire management. I'm just reluctant to sit down and work on a stat block, you know? Not in general. As I said, I was statting low-tech jets earlier. What I mean is, like, I'm reluctant to do it here because I don't know if it's considered boring or anything. I suppose I could just make a separate series. A playlist for miscellaneous things that aren't entirely world building. Like Galactic Requiem work. And focus more on the descriptive texts and more fun aspects of world building here. I suppose I could also have a ramble playlist or something, in which I just put the rambles, but I sort of go from work to ramble. You know? I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, I find it all interesting. I am perfectly fine working on stat blocks. I'm just worried you all might not find me working on stat blocks interesting. I mean, it'd be me somewhat silent, doing a bit of math, you know? Math and typing, doing my best to talk every so often, you know? Because, I mean, what's there to say? I mean, there's lots of things to stat. I suppose I could go over my process of statting. But let's be honest, you can only go over the process of statting like 5 times before you realize that the process of statting is the same each time, you know? Like, sort of. Like I said, I find it entertaining, but I'm not sure if it's worth it. Anyway, it's about that time. Time for me to go and get coffee. And since we started early, I think we'll call it there. I see another problem I have no problems mapping things for other aspects of Galactic Requiem. I have no problem statting things and writing descriptions and all that. But I'm always reluctant to do it here. And by that, I don't mean like I'm reluctant to do that work here. What I mean is I'm reluctant to work on the campaign that we run. Here, offline. I phrased that terribly. Basically, I feel like Worldbuilding Wednesday should cover everything we do for the campaign, which limits me slightly because I want to show every aspect of the preparations and so forth, so I don't work on it in my own time, which would be beneficial, I suppose, but also I feel like cataloging every aspect of how this goes, working on the maps, writing the details, etc., is important. Because that's like our World-Building Wednesday things, you know? So as I could work on other campaign stuff on World-Building Wednesday and so forth, and, you know, just things I need to figure out. Anyway, thank you all for stopping by. As usual, I've been your host, Casimir Basilius of the Grand Empire, and I hope you have a great day.